Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Big Bros podcast, episode 59 today. Getting into the 60s shortly. My name is Jeremy. Welcome if it's your first time joining us on the show. Great to have you on, and I'm here with my lovely friend and co-host, Ilan. How you going, mate?
I'm good, mate. How are you?
I am feeling great. I'm feeling buzzing. I'm excited to dive into it, and I'm feeling really fulfilled and feel like my heart has been given a big hug the last couple of weeks, or the last week in particular, because we've received some really lovely feedback over on the socials on TikTok and Instagram the past week, haven't we? And it's just really nice to, I guess, hear our message being felt and heard by different people that, haven't been listening to us for, also very long. Obviously, we've been doing this for about a year and a half now, and it's nice to start receiving some love and to notice that what we're saying is kind of getting some notice from people, and it's been beautiful. We've had people telling us about that they've loved hearing, our vulnerability, especially as guys. There's not many maybe doing this to the extent that we'd hope for the world to be seeing on the big stage, guys talking about their feelings and all of that. And I think people are starting to really enjoy hearing that from us, and it's been really nice to hear some lovely comments from people.
It's been fantastic, truthfully, because you see what people resonate with and you see what kind of messages and what kind of topics they like hearing about. And honestly, if that vulnerability space is something that people enjoy listening to, it's an area we'd love to tap into. But Jeremy, talk to me about what we're chatting about today.
Yeah, well, I think it all ties in really nicely to this week, which is, the older we are getting, we're 24 now, the less we're kind of caring about to the extent that maybe we did in the past, whether that's societal expectations, being judged on the internet, being judged by, what we wear or how we speak or what we do. And it's the notion of just being yourself more than ever before. And I think I'm kind of getting to that stage now where I feel like I'm way more content with just being myself more than I ever have been before. And, that starts, I think it's really just started from doing Big Bros. I think doing this has really taught me that. And for someone, might be something else. But for me, this has really brought that out for me, just unconditionally being myself and not caring about what people think.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think there's studies that have been done about self-esteem and confidence, and that tends to just increase with age. And I think the podcast, in a lot of ways, has accelerated some learnings. So for me personally, the older I get, the less I care about. One thing is strangers and their opinions. They're strangers for a reason, right? So I'm less concerned about what strangers think, because whenever you put yourself on a public platform like social media, you're always going to have people who don't like you, who try to tear you down. And you're not going to make friends with everyone, right? But your friends are your friends and your strangers are strangers. So why try to appeal to strangers who don't care about you, who don't actually care about the content you're putting out, about the energy you're sacrificing just to, make some people's day? And that's something I think I've gotten a bit better at, is not being so scared to say what I think. So being more authentic and saying what I truly believe, and not thinking about what, some stranger with some NPC username on the internet is going to care about.
User 573,069.
Yeah, it's like we posted a TikTok the other day, and it's like, what was the comment? It was something about, this person has no idea.
Oh, yeah.
This person has no idea. And then I look at the username. It's as if he got his cat and got its paws and started typing out on the keyboard what the username was. But no hate. But it's examples like that where it's like, maybe a year and a half ago, I would look at that and think, I'd be a little bit upset by it. But now it's like you look at it, and it's what a lot of content creators talk about, which is you just stop caring after a certain point. And that's something I've definitely have noticed, is just I don't give a shit as much.
And the stopping to care with that ties into also how you respond to that. And I think the best creators, influencers, minds on the internet, whatever you want to call it, when they receive like the hate comments or the ones that, go against what they're saying and they're kind of like condemning them, they respond by either agreeing with the person or just taking the mickey out of themselves. So if, you're a content creator making like football content or clothing content or whatever, and someone comments, your fashion sense is shit, I think the best thing you can do is respond by saying, yeah, mate, do you have any tips for me? Like, just continue taking the mickey out of yourself. And it shows that you're very lighthearted when it comes to this. You're not taking things to heart. And it kind of just adds a little bit of flavor to the comment section as well. Rather than seeing this, negative comment, the fact that the negative comment is then backed up with like maybe some positivity or maybe like someone self-deprecating themselves, it adds humor to it, and it's the best way to follow up, I reckon.
I used to hate the whole idea of kill them with kindness. I thought it was soft. I thought it was weak. But the more I've done this podcast, the more I realize that's the best recipe, not just in content creation, but overall life. But Jeremy, tell me, what's one thing you care less about as you've gotten older?
Yeah, well, I mean, I agree with you at the point about, voicing my own opinions and stuff. But I think what I care less about as well is putting time and energy into people that aren't doing the same for me. I've spoken about this on recent weeks as well, but it's a point I like coming back to because I used to have a lot more people-pleasing tendencies than what I believe I do now. And that has really been something I've been working on massively this year in particular. And it's made me feel like a more confident person in myself, because when you're constantly trying to please other people, put energy into other people that maybe aren't giving you that same respect and effort back, you feel like you become a shell of your own person. You don't feel like you're this robust person anymore, this person that, knows what they're going out into the world and wanting to achieve. You feel like you're just constantly appeasing to others for the purpose of wanting to be liked, because who doesn't want to be liked? It's great to be liked. You want to feel like people will speak highly of you. People will want to be around you. But you know what? You don't need everyone to like you, and you don't need everyone to want to be around you, because what would be the fun in that anyway? We speak about quality over quantity when it comes to friendships, and this is another branch off of that, and it all interrelates. So for me, the older I get, the less I care about trying to please other people, and rather focusing on the core people around me, the ones that, give me the time of day to the extent that I give the time of day to them as well. The friendships that we make each other feel better. And when I come across new people in life, because we're always coming across new people in life, you can quickly see the ones that will connect with you pretty quickly, I reckon. Even from like early interactions, like first impressions are massive. And I think when you're meeting someone, if you approach the situation with like proper interest in them, proper like active listening, proper, charisma and enthusiasm in wanting to meet them versus, just meeting them with a handshake and a how you going, nice to meet you, end of conversation, you can pick up on what this type of person will be based on the reciprocation of the first initial interactions. And I truly believe that. And I think that's how you can also pick up on the ones that, you can realize whether these people will fuck with you or whether they won't fuck with you.
You know what I love looking at is like, if people literally just ask you, what about you? When you're doing all the questions and you're asking, hey, what do you do? What do you study? What do you work as? What do you like? What don't you like? But it's all only you asking the questions. I think I've become a little bit more observant of that in the last few years, of like what kind of person that might be. It might be someone who is so used to getting questions asked, they don't care about asking questions of anyone else. And I think that's a really, really cool indicator. But somewhat connected to that, something that for me that I care less about is holding on to friendships that hinder growth. What I mean by this specifically is that when you come out of school, you might be tied quite closely to the friendship groups you have formed in your high school years, and those friendship groups kind of remain out of convenience. And they're the sort of friends that you have fun with, you go out with, you do cool stuff with, but whenever you pursue some sort of journey of personal growth, or you're picking up something new that perhaps, is out of your comfort zone, which friends there are hindering your growth? So the bit of that tall poppy syndrome that try to hang shit on you and say, what are you doing, mate? Or are there friends in that group that are, backing you in and saying, you know what, I don't have the balls or courage to do this, but you know what, I'm going to be with you every step of the way. Which friends there are, in a way, nurturing that growth from you. And I think as I've gotten older, I've been way more conscious that it's okay to cut off those friends. It's okay to even cut off a friendship group if need be, if they're not rather they are hindering your growth, if they're not supportive of your goals. And I think that's a really big thing, and it holds back so many people, because when you're younger, your friends are your identity. That's at least how it's perceived by a lot of people. You ask a lot of, people, the reason it hurts if someone loses their relationship or they lose their friends is because that makes up what they believe is their identity. So their identity, their self-esteem is so incredibly tightly controlled by who they surround themselves with, that just by departing and detaching themselves from that is such a scary thought. It's an ego. It's a bruise to the ego. So that's something I've kind of started caring less about, because I understand the alternative is way better. You get rid of certain friends, dead weight, but then you surround yourself with people who are like-minded individuals who are in the same emotional playing field as you. And, the world's your oyster in that point.
And the same goes for relationships too, attaching yourself so deeply to that person and then, maybe breaking up with them and then going through this crisis of trauma and heartbreak. And in that scenario, you got to ask yourself, well, why was I so attached? If you're so attached to that person in that situation, it's because there's clearly something missing inside of you that you feel like you needed to attach from this person. And I think the best way to get over that and maturing is realizing that you were attached. Because once you realize that you were attached, you can then realize, all right, I need to now detach, and I need to fill that void that clearly was within me with other things that make me ultimately the person that I was. Because I'm not my person because of this other person. I should be my whole person because of me. I don't need that other person to make me feel fulfilled and attached. It's great if they do that for me in a way. That's what a relationship is about. But realizing that there was clearly a void and it was just being filled by this person is the ultimate form of, caring a lot about people to the extent that you probably should. And it, goes for relationships like this example and friendships, like you've said, in terms of being attached to people, forming your identity around them, and that hindering your growth. What do you think though? I mean, we're talking a lot about what we care less about. What do you feel like is something that you still feel like you care a fair bit about, but you ultimately want to learn how to unlearn that trait and detach from that?
Great question. Tying my academic achievements to my sense of self-worth. And the reason I say this is, I think for a long time, when I had this discussion with my one of my tutors at uni, because he does a heap of work in the space, and something him and I were chatting about is the fact that a lot of students, especially psych students, you've got perfectionistic tendencies and qualities. So you go throughout your entire undergraduate being conditioned to try and get the best marks you can, to try and make yourself as competitive as possible. And when you spend so much time and energy devoting yourself to your studies to try and get into something, you attach quite a bit of emphasis on, if you fail, it must be a reflection of your self-worth, or at least that's how it feels. Now that I'm in a position now where I don't necessarily have to get the best marks and I can just, get away literally with P's, it's still a hard thing for me to grasp. It's still a hard thing in the sense that I'm still spending a lot of time on my assignments, and that's not a bad thing. It's good to try. But I feel like there's this rigid thinking in my head still where it's like, I need to do well. It's not I want to do well, but I need to do well. I should do well. It's that perfectionistic thinking that it creates so much pressure, and unnecessary pressure as well. Because I know that if, let's say I was to get a 60 instead of an 80, I'm still going to be a registered psychologist by the end of these 2 years. But by me looking at a 60, my ego would take the hit. For me, I've tied my academic achievements so tightly to my self-worth that I look at that and think, well, it's just not worth it.
Why do you think you have tied it to yourself?
Because I'll give you another example. If you spend a lot of your time and energy on one thing and that dominates your behaviors for the last few years, you take pride in the work you do.
just like an athlete probably.
Yeah, exactly. So it becomes what you're good at. So as an example, when I get my ass handed to me in jiu-jitsu, I don't see it as a reflection of my self-worth.
Because you haven't done it for all that long.
Exactly. But someone who's a black belt who might get hurt in that space or might get defeated by a lower belt, which is incredibly rare, but I'm sure it can happen. I'm sure from time to time, that would hurt way more because the time you spend devoting yourself to something, you attach that with your identity. There's this whole thing about what's it called? So James Smith, that he did a psychedelics trip once, and he spoke about the fact that people love me for who I am, or do people love me for what I do for them?
Love this.
Yeah, and I think I have
heard this,
and I think it's one of the coolest things because it's pretty much saying, and if you tie that back to yourself, can I love myself unconditionally, or is my love conditional on the things I can achieve? I think that is a very profound thought. And then Matthew Hussey, who was on Modern Wisdom, recently spoke about this as well. He spoke about the fact that, if you ask a mum why you love their child, they'll say, because it's my child. It's my child. I'm my own human. And I think that's something I've started to think about as well. And I think that's a really good antidote. So just tying it back to the whole thing about academic achievements, it's like, if I was to get a shit mark, I think it would still hurt. And I think it's self-work that I need to personally still pursue because I have this rigid thinking. But at the end of the day, even if I wasn't to get the best mark, I'll still love myself. I'm still my own human.
Yeah. I think athletes, very, very successful business people, entrepreneurs, I think they would struggle with that point a lot about, do people love me for what I do or for who I am? I actually remember talking about this to, a couple of our friends recently that, have a business, and, it's something that they were honest in talking about with me as well, because, they're doing well, their business is doing well. And, they found that a lot of people now are giving them more of the time of day because they're doing well externally, and on the face of it, it looks like they're building themselves up, they're getting that recognition, and it's clout at the end of the day, and who doesn't want to be a part of the clout of someone else? It's that notion of when you're up, people are going to support you, and when you're down, people don't really care about you, and they're going to be the first to criticize you. And it's a nice topic to come back to and think about at the start of your journey, in the middle, and then once you're eventually feeling like you're getting somewhere. And I think for you and I in particular, like, we're still at the start of this journey in essence. It's a year and a half in. For some people that might sound like a while, and look, it is a while. We've busted our gut for a long time now. A year and a half is a long time, and we've been very consistent at it. But you and I know in our minds that this is still just the beginning, and we have not even scraped the surface of where we want to be. And I think, for you and I, it's important to think about and come back to this topic that we want people to like us for who we are and not what we do. Okay. And I think we will naturally maybe see a little bit more of that if things get a little bit better for us, which hopefully they do. But that is why I think now everything we're experiencing now together, like the few TikTok comments that we get that make our day, the Instagram DM message from a random person that's never met us that is telling us they love our content, it's really important and it's making a difference in their life. These are the moments that we're remembering even more so because we don't have that big, successful, famous status. We're so small. We are so small and insignificant. So it's that message of, well, I think people are liking us for who we are, not what we're doing. You start to maybe feel like people like you for more what you do once you actually make it, in quotation marks.
The problem there, though, and I disagree with you. So wait, quickly, just to clarify what you're saying. You're saying people like us for who we are rather than what we do? Or are you saying the opposite?
When right now?
Yeah.
I think what I'm saying is now that, like, it feels like it's more authentic. It feels like the love that we're getting is more authentic because we don't have that status tied to us.
But I would argue that it's not about the status, it's about what we're saying. And people wouldn't care about what we're saying if it didn't provide some sort of value. So there's a condition applied. So that's fine. The world we live in is very conditional, and people for example, no one's going to respect a business if they don't have some sort of value. So we don't like, for example, Nike tracksuit pants just because it's Nike. We love it because they have cool clothing, cool articles of, shoes and so forth. So we do live in a world where there's conditions placed that where we essentially, we love things for what they can do for us. We're creatures of self-interest. And I think that's fine. The only time you're not going to have, the only time you will have unconditional love and likability isn't for your friends. It's not for your intimate partners. It's going to be for your kids. And hopefully for yourself as well, because that's just the reality of our world. Evolutionarily, we developed to seek out things where we can extract value from, and that's okay. That's not something that has to be demonized, but that's just the way it is. And I don't think, look, with the support we've gotten over the past week, there is something that people have resonated with. And I'm not saying they love us or anything like that. I don't think it's anything like that, but I think they love the message and they liked what they could take home, because what we spoke about was quite relatable. And yeah, but that's a bloody good conversation. I'm not gonna lie. I like the whole thing about, are you loved for who you are or for what you do?
Yeah, and I think it's something that people will always think about in terms of what they do. Successful people in particular, and I think it's one that, I would urge anyone to reflect on if you're listening to this and you're doing something that's quite fulfilling and maybe you're getting a little bit of traction for it. Ask yourself that question, are people liking this for what I am doing or for what I am producing? And, it might be a mixture of both, but I think you really start to notice which one it is based on the interactions with the people you're having. If it's quite superficial, the interactions, if it's, if they're only coming and talking to you when it suits them, when things are on the up, maybe it's very superficial. But if they're providing stuff and feedback to you, consistently or as time develops, that's when you know that, okay, this is deeper. This is maybe, more of an interest in actually me versus the product that I'm producing.
And that's what I suppose I've stopped giving a shit about as well with age, is those superficial compliments, right? People are very easy to congratulate you when things are going well for you. And yeah, look, it's great, it's flattering, but where were you when we first started, sort of thing. So I think, generally speaking, that's one thing I've started to care less about. And it's tied to the whole strangers thing as well, which is, unless you were there with me from day zero, and unless you're, that love is only conditional on me providing some sort of value to you, I don't care as much about what you say, because you're only there for the good times, not the bad times.
Well, like yes and no, because like people, like day zero, not everyone's going to know you on day zero.
I'm talking about people who already knew us. I'm not talking about someone who may have only stumbled onto us.
True.
That's a different story altogether.
Yeah.
I'm talking
like
about
people that were,
like acquaintances
in our circles, around our circles.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's something I've become way more okay with. And I know I know the purpose of this episode was to chat about things that we've initially just stopped caring about as we've aged. But truthfully, I like the direction it's gone in.
Yeah, well, it's also talking about things that we still maybe do care about as well.
Well, let me ask you, what's something you still care about and you kind of want to go away from it?
Yeah, it's a good question. On the spot here, I think, I speak a lot about people-pleasing tendencies and the notion of wanting to be better at that and getting better at that. I think I want to be better at not caring about, I think, random interactions or, could be like the odd date with a girl, for example, like something when maybe your interaction and the relationship you've built up with someone, it's nothing too deep yet, but, I feel like I'm sounding a bit rambly here, but
That's
what
okay.
I'm trying to say is, in terms of getting these words out, is I still feel like I care quite deeply about interactions with people, even if it's like very superficial and nothing of substance has really been built up yet. So I'll give the example of like going on a date with a girl that I've met on Hinge, for example, very common that, you might go on a date with someone or have a back and forth conversation with them over a period of a few days, and you ask to meet up, and they might ghost you, or, you have met up with them and maybe it hasn't gone as well that you thought it might have gone on the date. Like, it was fine, but it wasn't incredible. And things start to maybe fizzle a little bit after that. I still feel like I care a lot about that. I still feel like I care a lot about trying to, make that situation feel not necessarily, I don't think civil is the right word, but like positive. And I think that's probably detrimental, like the notion of caring too much about things that maybe, it doesn't need to be cared for. Like, there's a bunch of people out there in the world. You're going to meet people on the internet. You're going to meet people through conversations and interactions. And I think I've just started to realize that it's okay if people, just don't like you or don't click with you, maybe to the extent that you hoped for, or that you thought you clicked with that person. So I think unlearning how to take those things to heart and unlearning my tendencies to care so much about those situations is something that I'm still working on and getting better at, but working on.
My question to you is, well, I was speaking about rigid thinking before, that I must, I should, and I need. Do you feel like you place those expectations on yourself, and that's why you feel a bit shit when those things don't come out like you would initially want them to? Do you feel like you place that expectation, even if it's not a conscious thing?
No, I don't think I don't think I go in with expectations, but I think I ultimately like to enter everything in life with ultimate optimism and positivity. I think I'm that type of person, I like to come back to that example of our mate Sterling once giving me shit for saying, Jeremy would get excited for a fucking bird shitting on his shoulder, like anything would excite Jeremy. And I think that sums it up, just, the fact that I like to enter things with ultimate optimism and positivity. And when things don't go down that way, I would normally get maybe a little bit of a shock, like, oh shit, like what's happened? This isn't good. Why hasn't it gone the way, it was maybe not meant to, because that would be expectation, but why hasn't it maybe ended positively? And I think I've improved a lot with that. And I think I've become a lot more comfortable with just sitting in the isness of what a situation is. And that's been a nice mental shift and a perspective shift. But, it used to be something that used to eat me up a little bit more. So that's something I'm still working on.
Jeremy, I think we got to do an episode like this again sometime in the future, because I think our lists will always evolve with time and with our new learnings and maturity. And I really like that. I think the whole thing about just accepting the isness of life. There's no good or bad sometimes. It's what we make it out to be. But just accepting that something doesn't have to have a good or bad connotation attached to it. It's first of all very liberating, but also you can just leave it at that.
Lovely. I agree, mate. So thanks for the chat, mate. It's always nice to get a little bit vulnerable, get a little bit deep. And I hope you listeners have enjoyed hearing this side to us as well today. So if you have, please drop us a comment, drop us a like, drop us a rating. We would love to hear from you. But otherwise, thanks for tuning in, and happy Tuesday if you're listening on Tuesday. And we'll see you next week.
See ya.